And welcome to the first committee meeting of this year. It's good to see so many people, and welcome to the speakers as well. Thank you, and to the committee. My name is Nicholas Wright. I'm chair of this committee. The vice chairman is not here today. We have the committee administrator Amanda Lads, Heather Peachy, head of legal services, Kieran Power, head of development manager, and the development manager, Carl Brace, who's also acting as case officer today. Also, we have the assistant manager of the South Worcestershire Land Drainage Partnership. That's to give him his full title, unless he's got a promotion since last week. Andrew Fell. And you will see the fire exits here and where you came in. And this is being webcast on YouTube. And if it does go on quite a long time, we will have a break in the middle. Just one announcement to make, that Councillor Adams do come in. Councillor Adams is sitting outside the committee for this item and will not vote on the proposal. Okay, thank you. Have we any apologies for absence, Andy?
Chairman, I've had apologies from Councillor Andrew Dyke and Councillor Eric Bowden. Councillor Paul Middleborough is substituting for Councillor Bowden. Thank you.
Thank you. And have we any declarations of interest?
Chairman, for item 7, Councillors Rob Adams, Paul Middleborough, Linda Robinson and Margaret Rowley have declared a non-pecuniary interest. The Speaker, Neil Pearce, is a former planning officer at the Council. And also for that item, Councillor Middleborough also knows the other two speakers, Mr Skillen and Councillor Butterworth. Thank you.
Councillor Tourier?
Yes, I also know the two speakers.
And are there in Councillor Robinson? Adams? Declarations of interest from the committee? Thank you. You've all received the minutes for the meeting on the 5th of December, seems a long time ago. Can I take this as a true record of the meeting? And if so, can I have a proposal from Councillor Birch? Thank you, Councillor Dawes. Thank you. I've said this many times before. For those who haven't come to a planning meeting before, and I'm sure most of you have, the application is made up of several bits. We have not only the planning application, but the Town and Country Planning Act, the National Planning and Policy Framework, or NPPF, the Planning Practice Guide, the Waste Course Strategy, the South Worcestershire Development Plan, neighbourhood plans, etc. A lot of information. And actually, if you have, and I'm sure you have read the Planning Committee report, you'll see on paragraph 2.1 details of all the South Worcestershire Development Plan paragraphs, also government policy on paragraph 2.2, and other material considerations on 2.3, and also relevant legislation and regulation on 2.4. Just to show you really what goes into this work that the officers do, and then it comes to the committee. So I would advise you to do that. Before I give you what the speakers what they're allowed, I'll just make a comment that when this came up this year, I thought, not Drakesporton again, the first time of the first month of the year. So without being predetermined in any way or making a political comment, I do sympathise a little bit with your village. But we are here to discuss one planning application only, and not the whole of Drakesporton. I must make that point. For the speakers, we've seen you before, and welcome. We have 3 minutes for a town or parish council, 3 minutes for those objecting to the application, and 3 minutes for those in support. And we'll stop you if you go over the 3 minutes. And for those who haven't been to a meeting before, basically the planning officer will describe the proposal, and then the parish council will be allowed to speak, then the objector, then the supporters. Then it's open to the ward members to ask questions, and then the committee, and then the ward member can speak, and then it's open to debate. That's how it goes. There might only be one item, but it is important. It is the item, and so it is important whether it's one or 6 items. So this one is particularly important to us as a planning committee. Your attention is drawn to the advice note to applicants and the public, where it states that where updates have been received before the planning committee's meeting, a written summary of these is published generally by 5 p.m. on the day prior to the committee meeting. Please note that verbal updates may still be made at the meeting itself. Thank you. We'll move straight on to the one item, which is item 7, which is a planning application reference 24/01829, land to the south of Walcott Lane, Drakes Broughton. And I'd like to ask Carl Brace if you could outline this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, committee. A short committee, as we've heard, to begin the new year. Rest assured, February promises to be far more fulsome. We'll begin with some verbal updates to members. I'm aware members have been directly emailed by potentially a number of residents, you have seen and no doubt read those emails. Members will also be aware of an appeal decision last week regarding proposed development at Drakes Broughton. The site Freshfields is shown with the red star on the plan before you, and the application site before committee today with the red pin. Severn Trent, in full support of the council, requested a Grampian condition preventing occupation of these dwellings until Severn Trent have completed programmed upgrading works. The inspector rejected this and instead imposed the conditions shown on the screen. There is a disappointment the inspector rejected the Grampian condition, and accordingly we are seeking council advice regarding both the decision in full and the condition itself. This is directly relevant to the application before members, and just to talk you through how we're moving forward. The application will proceed with condition 15 as presented in the report. On the basis of council advice, if members move to support the recommendation as set out in section 7, we will either retain condition 15 as presented, or if so advised, amend condition 15 to replicate the inspector's condition as shown on the screen. This process would be compliant with the provisions of the recommendation and delegation to the Director of Planning and Infrastructure, who is authorised to amend conditions as required. As a Section 106 will need to be completed if members do approve the application before you, and council advice will be received prior to completion of any such agreement, there would, in my opinion, be no added delays to the issuing of any subsequent decision. Naturally, we will keep local members and the chair updated and members in general through this process. So the application before you is a full application for a development of 12 dwellings, including 3 affordable homes, with a commuted sum in lieu of the 0.6 element of the residual affordable home element required by policy, with a new access off Walcott Lane, associated works, SUDs and landscaping. Many members will be familiar with the scheme and site, which was previously before members in December 2023. Committee refused that application on the basis the submitted drainage strategy fails to demonstrate the proposed development would not have an unacceptable impact on drainage or increased flood risk elsewhere. As such, the proposed development failed to comply with policies SWDP 28 and SWDP 29 of the South Worcestershire Development Plan. As members know, we visited the site today and we viewed from Walcott Lane in the surrounding area. Thank you for your attendance, and also to Andrew and Fran for attending as well. And I'm sure we agree that their attendance was much appreciated as we looked at the various drainage elements and objections we've received. The application therefore returns to committee as it has sought to address the drainage refusal reason, and as such, officers propose a recommendation of approval with conditions and subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement. The red star denotes the approximate location of the site within the district, and we'll see Drakes Broughton located just to the north of Pershore. The application site is shown edge red on the location plan, and you'll recall walking down Walcott Lane earlier today, and the site measures 0.66 hectares in extent. The wider context of the site can be appreciated from the aerial photograph and the relationship with the wider built extent of Drakes Broughton. Existing residential development adjoins the east boundary and the village hall is located to the west. The north side of Walcott Lane is lined with residential development, as we saw today. The site layout before you is considered to be consistent with that previously considered by members in December 2023. The layout features 7 dwellings fronting Walcott Lane, albeit, as members will note, set back in the plot. Intervening distances to the dwellings opposite are at a minimum distance of 35 metres. Development then proceeds south into the plot in linear form, fronting the access road. Dwellings are orientated so they face onto the side elevations of the properties in Holly Blue to the west. The layout is considered to meet the technical and material requirements with regards highways, response to context and amenity, and it is noted this was not raised as a refusal reason previously by this committee. The following 3 slides just give examples of the house types and designs proposed. The designs are mixed and variations create visual interest, and it is noted a suitable and welcome mix of housing types is proposed. These designs are again commensurate with those considered by members in December 2023. In particular, the semi-detached dwellings addressing Walcott Lane are replicated in this application. I'll take through the house types. Views over the site from Walcott Lane, which we will be familiar with from today's visit. And a view across the site from the current gated access. The recommendation before members is to delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Infrastructure to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure the obligations and planning conditions listed in the reports set out below, as required by the Director of Planning, and for any subsequent amendments to the obligations and planning conditions set out in the report, as required by the Director of Planning and Infrastructure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I introduce Councillor Butterworth, who's going to have speak on behalf of the Council. Councillor Butterworth, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I have just 3 minutes, so I'll cut straight to the chase. This site has history. 3 applications refused at Planning Committee, 2 refused decisions upheld at appeal, and although considered, the site isn't included in the allocated sites in the South Worcestershire Development Plan. So why are we here again? The email exchanges this week and even today show there have been many questions that need answering before a decision can be made. I urge you to defer making a decision so the complex surface water drainage issues can be fully considered and understood so that there is detailed and accurate information for the committee to use to inform decisions. Questions that have been raised need time to be properly considered and answered. Until that's happened, a decision shouldn't be made. If the proposed drainage solution is allowed, it will increase surface water flooding on Walcott Lane, Brickyard Lane, Alley Gardens, the playing fields and the car park, impacting on the health and well-being of the local residents and the wider community. To date, highways haven't been part of discussions about mitigation for the increased surface water runoff on roads with no drains. They need to be consulted and included. The drainage engineers must be asked to revisit solutions, including the proposal for runoff from this development to Brickyard. It suggested that a better option would be for it to run the whole length of the public alley directly into Brickyard instead of the proposed solution, avoiding risk of flooding to existing homes and gardens. We need expert opinion to consider this option and report back. You all know that building here will have a negative impact on the local community, full stop. However, to build without full review and consideration of the drainage to ensure that everything is being done to mitigate increased flooding in the area will have serious consequences impact on people's lives for a very long time. This community needs your support. Please deliver the defer and decision and insist on more robust examination of the drainage strategy and solutions. For the record, I should make you aware of the serious concerns about traffic flow on Walcott Lane. Adding extra traffic and a new road to the mix will make a bad situation worse. The narrow road is busy, especially at school drop-off and collection times, and also when football training and matches clash with the events at the village hall, which results in single-file traffic as cars are abandoned along the side of the narrow lane because there isn't sufficient parking. And lastly, if you're minded to accept this application, which I sincerely hope you're not at the moment, please ask for a redesign with the single-storey buildings to the front of the development site to protect the street scene and retain some of the openness on Walcott Lane. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Butterworth. Mr. Kenskillen, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
At previous meetings, this committee has approved applications and then attached conditions. If this committee is inclined to approve this application, I strongly urge that a condition be attached changing the 2-storey terraced houses along Walcott Lane to 1- and 2-bedroom bungalows, bringing it in keeping with Holly Blue, where this council insisted on bungalows at the front of the site to lessen the impact on the houses opposite. 2-storey terraced houses are totally out of keeping with the existing street scene, imposing on houses opposite close to the edge of Walcott Lane, including mine, depriving us of privacy. Moreover, housing associations urgently need 1- and 2-bedroom bungalows for single individuals and couples to free up larger homes for families. SWDP 21 clearly states development must respond to surrounding buildings, complement the surrounding area and provide adequate privacy. This application does not meet those standards. While this committee will say sewerage is Severn Trent's responsibility, you approved 53 houses at Thornley on the condition that they installed 48-hour storage tanks. Yet now we have this site, plus 3 other live applications and Holly Blue, totaling 115 houses, all much further away from the main pumping station, connecting into a single overloaded pipe at the end of Shrubbery Road. There is no mention of any storage tanks, which is inconsistent and troubling. This area is the worst location in the village for flooding, with regular flooding to gardens on Holly Blue, the playing fields and properties in Walcott Lane, all of which increased considerably after Holly Blue was built. The proposed surface water system appears similar to Holly Blue and not much different to the last application, still referring to a non-existent surface water system in Walcott Lane. Just 2 weeks ago, there was serious flooding on the playing field. Building on this site will cause more water to back up, flooding the playing field. And with a very high water table, surface water has to go somewhere, resulting in increased flooding in the surrounding area. Council engineers got it wrong with Holly Blue, and the same will happen again with this site. Should further increased flooding occur as a result of approval, the residents of Drakes Broughton will be demanding answers from Wychavon Planning. Finally, this land is not included in the emerging SWDP and lies outside the village boundary. I respectfully urge that the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skillen. Mr. Neil Pearce, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. This application follows a previous application for an identical development which was refused in December 23. The previous application was essentially refused for a single reason: lack of adequate information on drainage and flood risk. The second refusal reason was a technicality due to a lack of a Section 106 agreement to secure the planning obligations. Since the refusal, my clients have worked hard with your drainage officers and the LLFA to overcome the technical concerns, and I'm pleased to confirm that the application is now furnished with a revised drainage strategy which engineers in the LLFA are satisfied with. The fact that these experts are happy with the proposal should give you and local residents all the comfort you need that this development will be drained appropriately and will not exacerbate local flood risk or pollution. Foul drainage is an important local issue for the reasons you have heard, and I can assure you that the proposed development will not commence until a scheme for the disposal of foul water has been approved by the Council in consultation with Severn Trent. Condition 15 of the recommendation imposes a Grampian condition on my client, which requires Severn Trent to investigate the existing problem and fix it prior to any dwelling on the site being occupied. This Grampian-style condition was not supported by Inspector Plenty in last week's appeal decision at Freshfields, Stonebow Road. Instead, he imposed a more traditional condition which requires the submission of a scheme of foul drainage to be submitted to and approved in writing by the Council, again in consultation with Severn Trent. I must stress that both conditions ensure that no dwelling can be occupied unless the powers that be are 100% satisfied with the foul drainage proposals. However, the inspector's condition does allow a little more flexibility for a possible innovative solution to foul drainage which does not rely on the existing substandard system. My client would prefer a condition more aligned with the inspector's condition. All other material planning issues, including highway safety, design, scale, layout, ecology, visual effects, have all been robustly tested previously and found acceptable by this committee. As set out in your officer's report, there are no technical objections to the proposed development. The principle of more homes in a highly sustainable location such as this is even more prevalent today with the publication of NPPF 24. Because of the current policy climate and poor housing land supply position, most communities are faced with similar developments in their villages. Officers are doing a really good job of sifting through the good ones from the bad ones, and this is a good one, otherwise it wouldn't be before you today with a recommendation to approve. I also appreciate that at times it can be a harsh responsibility for this committee to make difficult decisions, important decisions, and often unpopular decisions. Those decisions must be based on evidence and guided by the advice of professionals and experts. I would ask that you consider favourably this current scheme, which addresses the previous concerns raised by the committee and grant planning permission subject to the 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearce. The ward members are Councillor Rob Adams and Councillor Liz Tourier. Before you ask questions, I don't know who's going to do it first, probably Councillor Adams. You can include Andrew Fell in any questions, since this is mainly primarily around drainage. Councillor Adams, have you any questions to ask the speakers?
Yeah, I would like to ask one of our officers a question first, if I may. And just clarification, I think members have been led to believe, well, I certainly had, that we could only discuss the flooding element and not other matters. Now, I understand and remember from the last meeting, it took all week for a refusal reason to come forward. And when it was debated, we had other things on the agenda. I decided to go with that recommendation, if I remember, on what was said. Nothing against Neil Pearce, I've known in the biggest part of expected 20 years when he worked here and all that. He wasn't at that meeting, and therefore we couldn't ask about the design of the plan or the types of houses which Mr. Skillins brought up this morning. So my question to the officers is simple. Are we limited only to talk about flooding issue, or do we treat this as a new application in our questions?
Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. So for clarification, I think that's a really useful question, actually. The application is submitted in full, and it is a standalone planning application. So technically, members are able to consider any material considerations. What is also material is the previous decision made by this council and the reasons for that. So as members will have heard and be aware, it was previously refused on two grounds, one in relation to drainage, and two in relation, the second one was in relation to the Section 106 agreement, or lack of a signed Section 106. In terms of consistency in decision making, it's really important that councils do make consistent decisions, and introducing other grounds of refusal at this stage, whilst isn't something that this committee can't do, it's advised against, because one, it would be inconsistent unless there's good material grounds or change of circumstances that would warrant introducing additional reasons for refusal. Otherwise, it's absolutely unreasonable behaviour, and we would be very liable to costs at an appeal, an award of costs. I think that's the key. So technically, yes, you can consider the wider merits, but I think ultimately there was a decision by this committee, and whether or not members considered it fully previously, it is of concern, because obviously every time we make a decision, we should be making it as considering all the merits, and anything that would warrant refusal, we should have applied it when we were considering it. So I hope that clarifies. If there's any further clarification needed, I'm happy to do that. I don't want to confuse the matters, but like I say, it's a matter of consistency in decision making and being reasonable. And essentially, if we were to introduce new grounds without being warranted to do that, it's moving the goalposts, so that's unreasonable for the applicant, because how would have they known how to respond to that, if that, to illustrate the point?
Councillor Adams.
With that clarification. So, questions to the speakers this morning. I suppose the same one to Mrs. Butterworth and to Mr. Skillen is this site and this application has been going on many, many years, and all for the biggest part of those till more recent, our engineers here have had no support whatsoever. So can you, because you know, as I get older, Janet, I don't remember, how many years has this been going on? Between you and Ken, perhaps you could just clarify.
Yeah, so I think Ken's been to planning committee once for it, and I've been to planning committee. Well, Ken's been once. I've been twice. This is the third time I've been here, and it's been through judicial review. So I don't know. It's got to be 10 years. It's a long time, and it's a patch of land that the whole of the community. We have tried to buy it. We do want to actually have it as a space for the community. It's right in the middle, right next to the playing field, and where that side of Walcott Lane traditionally has been open. And that piece of land, the Eland site, the site next door, has caused more flooding in the area. We think it's from that area that's caused the flooding. It's certainly, even the social houses on the Eland site, those people there, the social housing people that are looking after it now, and the developers have said that we need to speak to the people next door, because it's that site that's actually causing their flooding. The water, they think, is moving along the road, and it's more moving out into Stonebow now, and onto Walcott Lane now. So the water table there is poor, and we've been to committee so many times.
Thank you.
To answer your question.
Yeah, thank you for the comments.
To answer Rob's question, it's probably about 14 years, I would say, maybe more. Originally, it was applied for just a few houses on there, somewhere around 5 or 6, which was turned down. It eventually went to 10 houses, which was turned down. In fact, it's been put forward for 10 houses several times, but every single application up until the last one was turned down by Wychavon. It went to appeal twice, and it was turned down on appeal twice. The last application, as you well know, was turned down by this committee. So it has a long history, and in the majority of cases, Wychavon have turned it down, and it's been turned down twice on appeal. And each time they've increased the houses, because now it's 12 houses. The application before this one and the one before, was for 10 houses.
Thank you. Ms. Question, if you keep to reasonably, we can keep to reasonable questions. Yeah. I know we like to hear the history of Drakesborden, but...
Well, I asked that question, Mr. Chairman, because I don't know any site that's ever been debated year after year on the same application site. It's just beyond me. However, Neil has persisted with it, and here we are today. I'll give way to other members.
Councillor Turrier, would you like to ask any questions?
Yes, please. I'd like to ask a question of Andrew Fell, please. Given all the information that you've had from residents and yourself, are you totally 100% committed to this new system is going to work? And that's just the drainage, but what about the sewage? What provision is there for that? How's it going to work?
So, first of all, I really can't talk to you about the foul side of it, because that's not part of our remit. But I only deal with surface water drainage, so I don't deal with the dirty side. That's a Severn Trent problem that I can't even begin to comment on. So, as soon as the previous application was refused, we were into meetings with the agent to discuss the reasons why, and we gave our reasons why that we recommended refusal. We had a very good chat. They went away and carried out an awful lot of investigation in and around the area, and this drainage strategy basically is what we would expect to see given the policies of the MPPF. It's draining now in the right direction, using the right infrastructure, connected to the right place. You've got all the restricted flows in place. There's swales in there, so as far as the MPPF and SUDs are concerned, it's providing what we would expect to see. And not only that, I mean, there's a lot of people looking at me to give in the answers, but you've got to also appreciate that I'm not where it stops. There's a level above me called the Lead Local Flood Authority. They're the statutory consultees on this application. They've been through the application, and as you can see from their response, they show, well, they haven't come up with any issues with it whatsoever.
Thank you. Yes.
I have a question for the applicant. I mean, I know that we're not really discussing anything other than drainage, but just on the basis that because we were so overwhelmed the last time with talking about drainage, we didn't really have a full discussion about anything else. And I wonder what your feelings would be about slightly altering the layout of the housing so that you didn't have all the social housing together, or put the bungalows in the front, which they used to do at Holly Blue because of the street scene. I just wondered what your feelings were about that.
It's, I mean, I've never been asked to consider the design or the layout by officers previously, so it's not something that's been on our radar. I think the scheme that's before you is a good quality scheme, a high quality scheme, and it works. I'm not saying that a different scheme wouldn't also work, but that would require a complete replan. It's not just as straightforward as moving house types, because the site is slightly wider at the front as it fronts Walcott Lane, and it sort of narrows to the bottom. I think there was a description of terraced housing. They're not terraced houses. They are blocks, well, pairs of semi-detached houses and one detached house. Walcott Lane is predominantly two-storey properties as well. The front plots are set quite a significant distance back from Walcott Lane, and it's slightly lower as well. So I don't think we've done a section or a street scene, but if you were to imagine that it won't be as imposing as I think you might think it would be, because it's set back from the road and it is slightly lower down. So at this stage we've come so far. My client's not here to confer, but I don't think we would look at a wholesale redesign of the scheme at this stage, on the basis that this scheme works and it's got the support of the council officers.
Thank you. Councillor Turier, would you have any further questions? No? Thank you. The one question you asked Andrew Fell was, would it work? Could you just reiterate the position with the wastewater, with the foul water, which you've already done? Because that question has changed. Could you just do that?
Sure. As you see in the recommendation, we still have the grampian condition in place. That is what is requested by Severn Trent, both at Freshfields, which we have the inspector's decision, which we've run through. And as I say, we are looking at getting council advice on that. Ultimately, well, I'll put the condition back up. It might make it a bit easier. In real terms, the highlighted bit of the condition on the screen effectively does what we were seeking through the Grampian condition, that we don't, or the condition isn't discharged until we have absolute certainty in terms of the public sewerage system that that Severn Trent are satisfied. So if it was to proceed with the condition before you there, we wouldn't discharge that condition until we had absolute written certainty from Severn Trent that they are satisfied that that element of the condition is complied with. And as we know, that would only be satisfied through Severn Trent undertaking the works that they've outlined in the Grampian condition that the inspector rejected. So effectively that condition has kicked back what we wanted the Grampian condition, but put the onus back on us as the local planning authority. So as alluded to with Mr. Pearce's comments, what the inspector's condition does do is allows some flexibility in the sense that it could open up a non-Severn Trent dependent solution like we saw on another site in Drake's Broughton. That's where the flexibility comes in. But in terms of public sewerage system, we will not discharge that condition unless we have absolute certainty from Severn Trent that they are happy and ergo they've undertaken those works. We just won't discharge it as an authority, basically. without that comfort.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Would you like to ask another question?
Yes, I just wondered if on the plans there is a pump site and this sort of thing, because I can't remember. And there is a separate pump house, yeah? Yeah.
Andrew?
Sorry, another in answer to your question, I just realised I should have also mentioned that it would appear the developer is looking to put the surface water drainage up for adoption. So if that is the case and it meets the adoption requirements of Severn Trent, the part of the sewer system, the surface water system within that development will be operated by and maintained by Severn Trent. That's providing obviously it's built in accordance with their requirements. So it clearly states that it looks like they're going through the adoption route. So that would give some comfort, if you like, to the residents that there's going to be a scheme that's being looked at properly by Severn Trent and not being maintained by a private management company.
Thank you. We'll open it to other questions from the committee. Relevant questions, if you can. Yes, Councillor Kersey, followed by Councillor Sims, followed by Councillor Middleborough.
Thank you, Chairman. I like to think that I only ask relevant questions, but thank you for the proviso. Two questions, please. One to Neil Pearce, even. Notwithstanding what Kieran has said, we are considering the full planning application before us today. You mentioned that you believe that our officers are sifting good and bad applications and that you believe that this is a good application. Mr Skillen raised the point about the bungalows and that the adjacent development does actually have bungalows to have that low rise at the front of the development. Is there any particular reason why that has not been considered in this application?
No, there's no particular reason at all. From my involvement in this, which does not go as far back as 14 years, I've only been involved in the last couple of applications. This is the basis of the layout that was submitted 2 or 3 years ago, and it hasn't really changed an awful lot since then, and it's never been brought to our attention that there should be bungalows on the site. So we've up to now, it's never been something that's been suggested of us. So that's the reason why there aren't bungalows on the site at the moment. And as I said earlier, it would require a complete redesign of the scheme for that change to happen now.
Thank you. And Chairman, if I may, a follow-up question to Neil Pearce. Knowing that Drakes Broughton do have a neighbourhood plan in place, which is valid for everything other than their housing allocation, have you reviewed that with regards to all their consultation about the need for bungalows and done the housing according to that need?
I'm aware of the neighbourhood plan. I've read the neighbourhood plan. I help a lot of communities write their own neighbourhood plans, so I'm aware how important that is as a document for local residents. This is a scheme of 12 units and we've got 2 bungalows on there. Most schemes of this size wouldn't normally include bungalows. I think they're 2-bed bungalows as well. So available market bungalows available for right sizing as well. The fact that we've got bungalows on there is a positive, a planning benefit. The housing mix meets your SWDP policy, and as far as I'm aware, meets the housing mix policies in the neighbourhood plan as well. It's certainly not been an issue that's been raised to us.
Thank you. And a question to Andrew, if I can, please, Chairman. Andrew, it's been mentioned about the storage tanks that have been used as surety, if you like, in the other application that we've seen in Drakes Broughton. Would you be able to explain to us, please, why this application wouldn't necessarily need that sort of thing within it? And I know obviously it's a completely different scheme, but can you explain why this application itself wouldn't necessarily be helpful to have that system?
Okay, before I do, again, I'm not an expert on the foul drainage side of it. I do have experience with the foul drainage. Without having Severn Trent's input, we are not, as a council or even as an applicant, maybe we're not 100% sure what the capacity issues are at this part of the village. It's certainly very well documented with regard to issues along where the appeal side was. That area, there are definitely issues because we've seen manholes that have been surcharging, so clearly there are issues there. It may be through the developer, the applicant going through Severn Trent, that there are less issues at this part of the village. All right, it all goes to the same pump station, but there may well be bigger pipes at this part of the village that have maybe more capacity based on the pumping rate that comes out of that application site. But that's just me speculating. I don't have the hard evidence to confirm that.
Okay. Councillor Sims?
Just a question for the developer, please, Mr. Pearce. Sorry, I didn't quite hear whether you wanted to add a new condition or whether it was the condition already that the council have put in. Did you say you wanted to add a new condition? Could you just explain that, please?
Yeah, certainly. I didn't want to add a new condition. I was just suggesting that my client would prefer the condition that the inspector imposed on the appeal last week as opposed to the Grampian condition. And the simple reason for that is the Grampian condition binds everybody to Severn Trent, a third party, to do something. And given their track record, my client's not convinced that they would do that in a timely manner. Might be speaking out of turn. The condition that the inspector has imposed just allows additional flexibility for my client to come up with a solution that doesn't rely on Severn Trent or their system. So in other words, treat the effluent on site and then effectively discharge it through a different route, so it's not going through the existing infrastructure that is obviously substandard. And it's a similar issue that some of your members will be aware about that's going on in Crowell as well. So it's not a new issue, but it absolutely is an issue that Severn Trent need to deal with. It's an existing issue that affects people now, today, as well as development coming forward. So anything that we can do to assist the council in getting Severn Trent to do what their statutory obligations are, then we're here to help.
So, Carl, can I just ask, is that a condition that you will add?
Yes. Basically, where we are, as I say, we're taking council advice on the inspector's decision and specifically asking questions around that condition. We will be led by that. So, for example, in terms of, as I set out with the recommendation here at the moment, for the purposes of consistency in terms of how we're approaching things at the moment, we're advancing with the Grampian condition, but we're taking council advice. There's sufficient headroom in terms of time between if this application is approved and the Section 106 being agreed, that we will have that legal advice. And in the event the legal advice is that the inspector is correct and that condition is robust, under the recommendation provisions we have, we can swap the condition out. Ultimately, we want to have a sound and consistent conditions and decision making. That legal advice we're seeking is to basically assure ourselves, assure residents, but also going forward having that security in terms of whatever condition we use. Ultimately, Severn Trent requested the Grampian condition, so we would assume that they are fully programmed and committed to those works. It's been rejected. We are where we are, but we want the assurances that the inspector's condition is sound. So in the event the legal advice says that it is, under the provisions, we would then swap that out. So just for, I suppose, clarity, we're proceeding as set out in the report, but we've got that flexibility built in, because this as I say, this appeal decision we received last week. So we are moving quite quickly to get across and address that, but then give certainty to everyone going forward, certainly in terms of Drake's Broughton and Severn Trent's current published position, of course, is still that Grampian condition. So once we've got that advice, that will potentially influence this if it's approved, but it also gives us something else to go back to Severn Trent with in terms of trying to obviously get the wider situation resolved as well. So there's two aspects to it that are quite important in terms of that legal review.
Sorry, could I ask Andrew something?
Yes,
please?
certainly.
Andrew, this morning it was really interesting. So he walked down a little pathway, footpath, which is where there is going to be some pipe work. And I think it was quite interesting, and I hope residents will be aware of this, where you were not happy with the original application where the water was going to be pumped upwards, and now you have looked at it and now there is going to be pipe work going down the field through the that little footpath. Sorry, could you just elaborate on that, please, for me? Thank you.
So the original application had a pump solution, which is a high-level red flag, really, for disposing of surface water, not only from us, but also from the lead local flood authority. And I don't know if you remember, but the original drainage strategy was relying on connecting into what they thought was a public surface water sewer. And in fact, the Severn Trent records are incorrect because of the amount of work and interaction that I've had with Worcestershire County Council Highways. We actually knew it was a county council asset. So what the original application was doing was looking to lift surface water into a highway drain, and we've heard about the flooding in Walcott Lane, so that would have been a complete no-no. So in this application, what they're doing now is they're following the general lie of the land, which is north-south and across to the east a little bit. So instead of having a pipe solution now, we're all going to go by gravity. It will come out of the back end of that attenuation pond, limited discharge based on the Greenfield runoff rate, which is pretty bad given the fact that it's heavy clay. There's then going to be a piped solution which comes out of the back of that pond, runs along the footpath, and then will drop onto the culvert where it runs south to the back of Broughton Lodge. Like I say, we've been speaking with the applicant and their drainage engineers, and that mimics pretty much what we'd expect the natural flow of the water to do in its current state.
Councillor Middleborough.
Thank you. Two questions to Mr. Pearce. The first one's very specific in relation to the foul water drainage arrangements. If the Grampian clause remains as it is, will your clients then appeal against the decision, assuming we voted for it, appeal against the decision made by this planning authority?
That's a tough one to answer because a lot could happen between now and when that decision would be made. What I would say is that we don't want to go to appeal. We want to find a foul drainage solution that works for our site and that works locally. And we're here to work with the authority, not against the authority, and with the parish council as well, not against the parish council. So if we went to appeal, it would be an absolute last resort, and I don't think that would happen. I think there is enough for us to work with the planning authority and with Severn Trent to get a scheme that works, everyone's happy with.
Okay, well, thank you for that. The second one is, I mean, say, like Mr. Skellen, I've probably been involved with this for as long as 14 years. And I think both of us were involved with further developments along Walcott Lane. And the one point that we were always making was the position of single-storey properties on that west side of Walcott Lane. It's going to take some time for the foul drainage to get sorted out, I think, with Severn Trent one way or the other. Is there not an opportunity for the developer to come back and look at the redesign of the site, particularly to Walcott Lane? I've heard your previous answer. I'm making the point to you that it's something you could take back.
Neil, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I will do, yes. You're right. If this is resolved to grant today, we've got to get into a conversation with the lawyers about the 106 agreement. That's not a quick process, sadly. So there is time, and I will give you an undertaking that I will go back to my client and I will discuss with him the opportunity of looking at a plot substitution, if you like, so moving those plots around. That's all I can promise. I can't promise that that will result in an amended plan being submitted. Now, obviously, I need to convince the planning officers that any subsequent changes are acceptable. There's the added complication that there would need to be further reconsultation. It might need to come back to planning committee, so it's not just as straightforward as doing those plot substitutions, but I will have the conversation with him. He's recovering from a knee replacement, otherwise he'd be here today, and I know he's watching this online as we speak, so I will have a conversation with him after the meeting and see if there is anything we can do, even if we put it in front of the architect to do a sketch to see if it works out. But it's the knock-on effects of the green infrastructure, the parking and the highway roads, so it is not as simple as just moving them, but I will look into it for you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't take questions from the floor. You've had speakers, so I'm sorry about that. Councillor Morris.
Yes, it's for Councillor Butterworth and Mr Skillen, possibly. One of the suggestions you made earlier on was that you were asking us whether we'd be minded to ask for a deferral. I think on the grounds, I think the words were a more robust drainage plan. I'm not expecting you to know the technical knowledge, but I need, before I make a decision on this, I need to kind of understand what your expectation is, or what the expectation of the village is, and how deliverable that is, because from my perspective, a lot of the issues that have come up today seem to lie with Severn Trent. So I mean, I may be misunderstanding that. I would like your input. So in a nutshell, you're suggesting that we considered a deferral. What are you hoping to achieve by us potentially agreeing to that? Thank you.
Thank you. What I think I would really like, what the community would really like, is for the surface water drainage to be just looked at again, to make sure, particularly the roads in Walcott Lane, it floods. There isn't, I don't think there's ditches, and I don't think there's any surface water drainage in there. Highways, to my knowledge, I'm told, I think there was communication this week that said that highways needed to be consulted, and they haven't been consulted, I don't think, and I would like them to be involved in this so that we have got certainty that what we're doing here is not going to increase the problems. We have the problems with the foul water. Let's not make the surface water flooding an equally large problem. It is big at the moment, and it'll just get worse. So I would like to have a review, given the communications this week, so that I'm certain that I'm confident, and everybody else is confident, that it is not going to just cause problems, that whatever's implemented here actually is going to make the living in Drakes Broughton, not going to make it worse, it's going to improve it, not make it worse.
Andrew, could you answer those questions? Thank you.
I shall look over to my colleague here, who's going to magically put a plan up on a screen for us. Okay, so this is the surface water, part of the surface water strategy that we've been looking at. The key bit here is the junction, the bellmouth off of Walcott Lane into the site. And I don't think we've got the powers to do it. But if you look at the blue line running north-south, at the very top of that blue line is a manhole, and just above that manhole is a gully. Basically, from that gully south, all the surface water from within the site goes to the pond. The only extra surface water, if you want to call it that, is the bellmouth off of Walcott Lane. That's the only water from that site that's going to go onto Walcott Lane. And that is partially because that bellmouth has to be constructed in accordance with Worcestershire County Council's guidelines and drained accordingly. And you're talking about, well, I don't know how big that bellmouth is, but that's the only extra bit of surface water from that application site that will go anywhere near Walcott Lane.
Thank you.
Can I follow that up?
Yes.
Okay, hypothetically, say that doesn't work, what is the natural progression of events? Because, I mean, until something's done, we don't know for certain that it's going to work, do we? Which is what the village are concerned about.
So the site will be graded south from the bellmouth, and water doesn't go uphill.
I think it's just, but before we get into too much technical details on here, We've got a drainage expert here who's... would you like to answer Mr.
Yeah,
Skillen?
I would like to answer that.
Briefly, thank you.
What he's basically saying is that the plan that's being put forward will ensure that that site doesn't is drained properly and all the water is taken away. I'm not arguing with that. That's probably going to be true. But what at the moment that land acts as a sponge and absorbs water. It still backs up onto the playing field, and once it backs up, it goes across Walcott Lane and starts flooding the houses down Walcott Lane. Now, what I'm saying is that you may have well taken the water off that site, but it's still going to back up even more now because we haven't got that piece of land acting as a sponge holding the water back, and it's going to still spill over Walcott Lane, and it's still going to flood the playing field. The site, yeah, may be okay, the site, and the water off the site taken to where Andrew says it's going to go. But even now, the water is going across Walcott Lane and into the playing field.
Thank you. Thank you. Andrew?
This isn't the place to start talking about the drainage of the playing fields. That is a separate issue which is outside of this planning remit. We are looking at the drainage of this site. The drainage of this site meets, and again, it's not just me, I know I'm the spokesperson here. You've got the lead local flood authority. They're the big people that sit higher than me that are saying that this scheme accords with that of the MPPF. Highways have got no problem with the drainage of that bellmouth. That site drains south according to that scheme, and that's what we are looking at.
Thank you. Questions? Any further questions from the... Yes, Councillor Dawes.
Thank you. Yeah, a question to Mr. Pearce, please. This whole scheme is hinged around this drainage issue, which then hinges on the drain running along the footpath. Would you be prepared to make sure that that is put in before you start any construction on site? Because I think that would be important to drain the site and take the water away from everywhere else.
Neil?
The short answer to that is probably yes, because the first thing that goes in is the drains before any other work's done. Obviously, you know, site clearance and things like that. But and then I would imagine the road will go in. So yeah, I would have thought that would be one of the first things that has to go in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? No.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I can't sit here.
Sorry. Sorry. Who are you actually?
Brickyard Lane stands as it is. Andrew Fell knows this. I've spoken to on occasion. There is a
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to stop you.
Please. It needs to be referred and brought back.
Thank you for your comments, but thank you. We don't allow... for those, I do understand there's very great feelings about this particular development, as is all developments. And right at the start, I said that we had a great deal of sympathy with Drake's problem, but unfortunately, you're not allowed to speak. You have speakers representing you. And our idea is to debate this application fully and to come to a conclusion. So if you could just not speak until then, thank you. Further questions from the committee? Then I'd ask Councillor Adams, would you like to speak as member?
I just wondered, I can understand Mr. Rooker that just is one of the properties on the end of that footpath that we walked in along this morning. Just for clarification, in the last 24, 48 hours, tremendous, and most of the committee, emails floating backwards and forwards. There was one suggested in the last 24 hours that there might be a better scheme that the drainage would go straight down onto the lane. That may have been what Richard was referring to. I have no idea. Would you like to make comment on that? We have something in front of us, which that is what we're debating today. But I think I ought to be aware that it could be redirected another way. That's straight down the footpath to join.
Andrew?
So yes, I've had a conversation with one of the residents who lives south of the footpath, and we discussed how that could be achieved, how that might be achieved, and also how it might not be achieved. The key issues that we spoke with the applicant and the agent at the outset were, where would this water normally flow? Where would it naturally flow? The natural lie of the land points south-southeast, that general direction. As a result, the watercourse behind Broughton Lodge would be the natural point that that water would permeate to, which is why we have a drainage scheme. I mean, in fact, if we were to go down another page, you'd see that the outfall from the pond goes all the way down. There we go. So it goes out of the site, onto the path, all the way along the path, and then discharges onto a culvert which currently exists behind Broughton Lodge. So there's I'm also dealing with a separate application with regards to a couple of properties south of the footpath where they are having drainage concerns. And it's been mentioned that there may well be issues south of Broughton Lodge, which is the system this is connecting into. And is there an alternative to go to a different location? Technically, it could happen, but it could only happen if the levels of the system in front of Broughton Lodge and along Brickyard Lane would allow it. If the intention for the agent applicant to have this line adopted, then the gradients and the pipe sizes have to accord with Severn Trent standards. You can't put anything in and expect a Severn Trent to adopt it. It could be that the infrastructure along Brickyard Lane is too high. And if it's too high, you can't connect onto it. It's as simple as that. The other, probably more important issue is that there's a watercourse behind Broughton Lodge which would naturally capture the groundwater, overland flood flows, call it what you will. So the discharge point here is the correct point to discharge the surface water to. If you take surface water beyond that, you are then connecting into a system which wouldn't necessarily be naturally receiving that water. And you could then cause a problem downstream of that point. So this is why we are at the point where we are. We have explored the options in terms of the lie of the land. But, sorry, so the idea is that this is the correct point to discharge this surface water. Going beyond and to Broughton Lodge could potentially cause other problems, which would then, well, that wouldn't be acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Adams. Councillor Adams, do you want any more questions or could you like to address the committee?
I'd like to address the committee.
Then over to you.
Thank you. First of all, can I clear up a point for the residents of Drake's Broughton here this afternoon as to why I'm sat here and not over there voting. And I declared that I had predetermined this application. The reason for that is I have never liked this area in Drake's Broughton. I've been open and honest with the committee. I haven't liked this area, and I've made my mind up. I could never vote for an application in this area of Drake's Broughton. I think, dare I say, I believe it is the worst area. Alley Gardens and round there, I've violently, or not violently, but spoke heavily against an application going through for approval. So today I need to be right and straight, and what's more, I don't want my jacksie kicked by Heather Pearson this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So I'm out of voting for that, and that's my reason. I don't like this area, and I never have done. So let's move on to what's before us this afternoon. And do you know what, last night I sat down to think about with my little puppy terrier dog Biscuit on my lap and said, what am I going to say tomorrow? And I did what I have always done, really, when I'm undecided, reading through what I was going to say before a committee or what I wanted questions answered. And it's back to that old scales, isn't it? The easiest way is to the old scales. So I drew my little scales here and I put it down. And so for me, the biggest reason why you should vote and pass and approve of this application this afternoon is that we haven't got a 5-year land supply. And that is the one thing that is making a lot of applications that we've been discussing the last few years, is this 5-year land supply. And that is heavily weighted on any applications. So what have I got against that? And you know what? One of the biggest things I've got against that is the fact that 14 years backwards and forwards with applications, and the majority of those years haven't been supported when talking about this application side by our engineers, have not. Just remember about that. 14 years of discussing this site. So, there we have. I can speak on this side about things that are not particularly heavy-weighted that you could bring into it, but I do think they think it is. It is the only greenfield space in the centre of the village available to the community, or could be available to the community. Lots of residents would like that. I know it's a wildlife area as it is at the moment, and we certainly want those in planning, as we all know. So just remember that. Approving this today, that will be lost. In amongst all the houses that we need in our 5-year land supply, don't forget we are only a stone's throw away from the Parkway station site, when all those houses there will be up for grabs. Why do we have to really throttle Drake's Broughton and the thoughts of the residents when that is just there? And hopefully, and my hand will go up first, will be to consider and approve the plan that is emerging in the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review. A lot of exciting things can come onto there. You know, hands off Drake's Broughton, please, today. Hands off. So I've mentioned that. And you know what? The other thing that I've got down on my list here is the fact that this application has done and will do in the future is the fear for the residents at Drake's Broughton that live in that area, as every time it rains, and I believe in climate change and these heavy storms we've had, am I going to get flooded today? Am I not? Really, how do you put a price on that? What will this do to the price of my house? I wanted to downsize and all this rest of it. Think if all of us came to be a member here of Wychavon District Council to support the residents of our communities. That's what we all came to try and do our best, and that fear carries a lot of weight for me. But then the main thing is that I cannot, and I ask you all, really, you've got 3 choices, haven't you? To refuse this application, to approve this application, or what I believe you should be considering strongly today is to defer it. And the one thing for defer it will do is we shall have clear ways for it over this Grampian condition. And I believe we should wait. 14 years it's been discussed now. What time, I don't know whether Carl would like to make, I don't know when we will get a response, but just wait a bit longer. I was always taught by my mother, if it's worth having, it's worth waiting for. With that, Mr. Chairman, I say no more. I thank the committee. I thank our officers. I thank Severn Trent for suggesting this Grampian condition that will be used time and time again. We will get clarification, and I think at that point there will be a way forward that we can proceed in. Think of the residents. Think what's before them. Please, please, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Adams. You're always eloquent and speak fully on behalf of your people in your area. Councillor Tourier, would you like to say anything?
Not really. I'm totally depressed about this situation. I think that Councillor Adams is correct. We only have 3 options. I would also lean towards, at the very least, deferral. But I understand all the pressures that we're under. I don't think it's...
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know what to say. Sorry.
Thank you. I shall open it to... Thank you for the comments. Should open the debate from the rest of the committee. Councillor, who's first? Councillor Dawes.
Chair, speakers need to return to their seats.
Would you like, you weren't seated anywhere in the first place, but if you could return, thank you. If you find a seat somewhere. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Dawes, for reminding me. I should try and remember by the next committee meeting. Questions and the debate, not questions. Would somebody like to open the debate? Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Adams has done absolutely the right thing. I think he's done what you should do as a representative and has spoken freely and on behalf of the feeling of residents. And as you said, he articulated the point very well. I think we, regardless of feeling towards the site, we've got to look at the application based on the decision that we made in the past, and drainage is of course a key issue for the village. And when we were out on the site visit today, we had a discussion about the land drainage, and it was reassuring to hear that Mr. Pearce was willing, and his client would most likely be willing to look at that as a matter of priority. And it brings me to the conditions of 13 and 14. I think if this committee was minded to approve the application today, then those conditions would need strengthening so that the land drainage solution is not just submitted to the council, but also implemented before a spade touches the ground in terms of developing any houses on that site. You know, you need that sufficient land drainage scheme in place before anything in terms of developing houses is even thought of. And I think the argument for bungalows at the front of the development is a very strong one. You know, we do have to look at the streetscape of our villages and how we protect it. And the residents are right, two-storey dwellings in that location aren't necessarily suitable. So I would also agree with the principle of those changing to one-storey dwellings. It would, of course, minimise the impact for those residents on Walcott Lane from a streetscape point of view, and the implications that will have on their properties. So I won't propose anything at the moment, Chairman, but I think there are some conditions that within the application that need strengthening if it were to be approved. I think that there's more we can do to provide reassurance to residents. But I thank Rob Adams once again for articulating his points. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Kersey.
Chairman, thank you. Can I first of all say to everybody here today how utterly relieved I am that the committee refused this application when it was before us previously, because just based on the amount of questions that we've had, the materials and information that has been given to us, and the fact that an extremely different drainage solution has been put forward by the applicant before us today to consider, it gives me massive relief that it was refused by the committee. It does give me concern that the applicant wanted us to actually approve the first one that was before us, but nevertheless, it was refused. I would like to thank Councillor Adams for arranging for the site visit today to be included with Andrew, because that was absolutely vital today to actually see this technical information, to actually see where we're talking about the different water flow and all the rest of it. It's been really useful for us to look at that. So thank you both very much for that. Now, Councillor Butterworth said that she would like the committee to defer because she feels that the whole drainage piece should be explained and understood. Now, I always listen to what Councillor Butterworth says, and unfortunately for Drakes Broughton, we've had many opportunities to do that because of the number of applications that have been before us for Drakes Broughton. So thank you, Councillor Butterworth. But explained and understood, and that was something that really rang in my ears, because that was what was really vital for us today on the site visit and in the questions that we've had, because Andrew was absolutely inundated with questions, and we looked at every particular part of the site, and then we asked him more questions in relation to that. But what I did come to mind as I was stood halfway down that path is if only the residents of Drakes Broughton could have a similar explanation to be able to understand some of the facts. Because at the end of the day, we're lay people. There's a massive concern, which again, Drake's Broughton know, that I totally have full empathy with the whole fear of flooding. Living where I do, it's a fact of life. So it's understandable that Drake's Broughton are extremely concerned and fearful about flooding, and that's why there needs to be comprehensive explanation and understanding given to residents in the same way that's been given to us on the site visit today. For example, the whole thing about whether the drain runs to the end of that lane or whether it comes off part way. When we were there with the explanation, it was much better for us to see that. What was also really useful is to understand the true implications about the conditions, the gramping conditions, or the fact that this council takes so seriously the fact that Drake's Broughton have been inundated for the last at least 2 years with planning applications, that this council has gone to such lengths to work with Severn Trent to be able to get the dates in place for the improved infrastructure so that we can put particular conditions in place. But what that does is it gives us, as Carl said, we would not actually discharge any conditions until we had absolute certainty. Now, I think it's concerning for residents to hear us debating it today. But what we do today, whatever we do today, is only the start of anything. There's so much more, as Councillor Adams says, this site has been on the cards, if you like, for 14 years. But if the committee approved this today with conditions, it certainly would not be a quick route to development. There's a lot of things in there. There's a lot of surety things in there. And as Carl says, there would have to be absolute certainty before any conditions were discharged. So I think certainly the residents of Drake's Broughton can have that comfort, if you like, dare I use the word, that whatever happens today, that isn't the end of it. There are many, many mechanisms in place to ensure that ultimately what they fear, which is would make the flood situation worse, would not happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kersey. Any more comments from the committee? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chairman. As many of you know, I've lived next door to Drake's Broughton for nearly 30 years now and have represented them on the County Council for just coming nearly up to 4 years. And since I started representing them on the County Council, I've obviously attended their parish council meetings. And it is very rare that a parish council meeting occurs that they are not discussing the poor drainage on the playing field or on Holly Blue and the attempts that have been made to put it right, etc., etc. And I just ask myself, what confidence can residents place on conditions, no matter how strong we feel they are, when their lives are so blighted by surface water and foul water issues? I can see nervous looks the moment Severn Trent gets mentioned in this, because particularly there's little confidence in Severn Trent and what they're doing, based on past experience. And when Neil Pearce suggested that evidence and experience strengthens their knowledge and resolve, well, it doesn't strengthen the residents' knowledge or reassurance one bit. And perhaps I should have asked the question, maybe it was obvious, but the condition that's been highlighted on the screen and on the inspector's condition seems to deal more with foul water than surface water. And that concerns me a lot. Because here we're looking at an area that suffers from surface water. We're looking at houses further down Walcott Lane that do flood regularly when we get heavy rain. And all round Holly Blue, when that came up for permission, we were reassured it'll be all right, it's being covered by this and covered by that. It hasn't worked. Flooding seems to be a rule to itself. Our drainage engineers and the leading flood, they do their very best to get it right. But we don't know exactly what is coming in the future or how resilient it needs to be. And we're told that we must be consistent in our decision making. Well, we've refused applications here for the last 14 years. If we're being consistent, should we be looking at deferral at least, or refusal. I'm going to hear the rest of the debate, Chairman, before I go further, but those are my concerns particularly.
Thank you. I think, thank you, Councillor Robinson. I think condition 13 deals with surface water. So you've got different conditions. Kieran, could you just go over that one?
Yeah, so there is a separate condition for surface water drainage and requirement for the strategies to be submitted, and that's condition 13. And I think Councillor Birch was talking about potentially an amendment to some conditions, subject to a potential amendment, depending what motion comes forward to that. And I just thought I'd pick up on that because I think ultimately at the minute it prevents any new dwelling being occupied before the surface water drainage works are put in place. What we could incorporate within that is an agreement of a timetable for it, because I think there'd be elements that you'd want. I think we've discussed it today that we potentially could get early on in the development, but other aspects might come a bit towards the end. So connections from the new dwellings might be put in from day early on in the scheme, or they might be done. They might be doing a bit later on when they actually are not building that plot out. But we could get some of the surface water features on the site earlier. So that an amendment to that condition, a slight amendment to agree a timetable to get some of the works further up front rather than at the moment. In theory, it probably wouldn't happen like this because it wouldn't make sense from a build-out point of view. But in theory, there wouldn't be anything stopping them doing all surface water matters right at the end in terms of the wording of the condition. So we could nail it down a bit more if members were minded from that perspective. And in just about the consistency, I think absolutely there's a lot of planning history on this site. I think just really the point in relation to the most recent planning history on the site and the comparables from the previous decision that was made at this committee and where we are now, the scheme's very similar in lots of ways, but the surface water drainage matter was the key issue for the refusal then, and that has changed, as I know has been discussed quite considerably from the previous drain solution. So that's what's materially different, I suppose, that in planning terms. So that's why we're talking about, or I made the point about consistency then, because I think unless there's material changes to something, then it's unreasonable to introduce something that we should have refused it previously or made the point previously, and that was the point on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kieran. Councillor Dawes, followed by Councillor Middleborough.
Thank you, Chair. Following the meeting we had on site today, I was very reassured by the drainage solutions that were put forward, and I don't think we can challenge those further. I see no reasons for deferral. We have either a Grampian condition or a satisfactory alternative as far as foul water goes. So subject to a clause being added to either 13 or an additional clause to say that the the surface water drainage is put in before any buildings are raised on the site, I would propose approval.
Thank you.
Along officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Can I just bring in Carl before you? Do you mind? Councillor Middleborough. Carl.
Yes, just in terms of consistency of decision making as well, but also just to remind members, we've had 2 appeal decisions at Drakesport brought in very short time where we have considered drainage in totality. We've had very, very clear steer from 2 inspectors now on where planning starts and stops in terms of drainage. If you read the Freshfields decision, the inspector does go into quite a bit of detail in terms of Severn Trent's responsibilities as well. So as we are debating this site primarily around issues of drainage, we've had very clear steer from the planning inspectorate twice. We've avoided costs on the drainage element twice. I don't think that, an inspector or indeed an applicant would necessarily be as benevolent. Again, we've got to be careful in terms of our decision making with the clear steer we've got, especially in the face of the technical advice from the LLFA, our drainage advisors. As I say, we're carrying forward Severn Trent's recommendation. We're taking council advice on that condition as well. I think as far as us as a planning authority, we have try to tackle and address drainage in totality at Drake's Broughton as thoroughly and robustly as we can, and challenge an inspector twice on these points, particularly with regards foul water. So it's just to be mindful of that, and I'd certainly, I think, given everything before you, would urge against deferral, because I think we're going to, ultimately, I may as well just give it you bluntly, if this is deferred, if we're going to be in an appeal situation, and to be quite frank, we're not going to be able to defend this at appeal, and it would be a cost situation. With the technical information before you, and the previous inspector's decision all points us one way, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Councillor Middleburgh.
Thank you, Chairman. At the outset, I mean, say, in terms of meeting and answering questions so far this afternoon, so thank you for Andrew for that. Moving away from surface water, I'm more concerned about the foul water position, because it affects nearly all of the residents one way or another in Drake's Broughton. And I think we've got an obligation to them. And I asked two questions of Mr. Pearce as the agent. I asked him if the Grampian clause remains.
To be honest with you, Councillor Middlebury, we've rather gone through the questions.
Sorry, no, I asked him two questions.
Oh, you are, sorry. I thought you said you asked him.
Yeah.
Sorry. Carry on.
And his answers were, my first question was, if the Grampian clause remains as it is, would they appeal a decision if in relation to this application? And he couldn't answer that because he wasn't sure. And what we know is the position's going to be clarified in perhaps a few weeks' time. We're not quite certain when, but it may be clarified one way or another. So there's that uncertainty from the applicant about what they're going to do about the Grampian clause. And I want something like the Grampian clause in there and not to be subject to an appeal and then not to be quite as strong. The other question I asked was in relation to redesign of the site to bring single-storey buildings to the front of Walcott Lane. And what did he say? Very kindly, he said that they would go away and have a look at it in terms of the design. He did point out there's lots of complications, but they've offered to go back and have a look at it. So in my mind, there's some uncertainties as it stands at the moment, and I don't want to get rushed into making a decision today with those uncertainties. So for those, and Councillor Adams has talked about a deferral, the chairman of the parish council has talked about a deferral, so I'm very minded to actually think until we have answers on those 2 points and certainty on those 2 points. I find it very difficult to take a decision.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
I think the discussion this afternoon graphically illustrates the problem that we're all facing. We just don't know what's going to happen. When we don't know what's going to happen, I think the important thing is that we lay the facts on the table, which are that from a drainage point of view, we've been given all of the clarification that can be given at this stage. I understand from the residents' point of view that because they've been let down so often in the past, it is very difficult to accept that this might work this time. So as a backup, I think it's really important that residents in Drake's Broughton are aware that there are other courses of action that they can take, as I understand it, should this not work. Ultimately, this is Severn Trent's responsibility. There is nothing to stop the residents clubbing together and actually making damn sure that in the event that what we've heard today doesn't work and doesn't come to fruition, that they have a strategy for addressing the person or the body that is getting this wrong. We are in an impossible position because, as has been outlined by Carl, were we minded to defer or refuse, the inspector will look at our decisions up to now. The inspector will look at the decisions that have the planning inspector's decision at the last two and conclude that we were given all of the facts, that if the facts are correct, there is no reason not to support this application. So whilst I understand that this is incredibly unpopular and I find it very difficult to do this, but I feel I must support Councillor Dorks, and I'm prepared to second this application. And I apologise that this is unpopular, but we are here to make decisions based on the facts, and nothing that I've heard today has convinced me that this won't work. And if it doesn't work, then residents need to take other action. And every time you have sewage running down the road, you need to get on to Severn Trent, you need to complain to your MP, you need, and please don't shoot the messenger.
Excuse me, sorry. Do let Councillor Morris speak.
Please do not shoot the messenger. We have a responsibility to preserve Wychavon's resources. If we refuse or defer, and Carl's advice is correct, then we are opening the council up to a cost award. And I am trying to explain to residents, as I understand the situation, please complain to the person to the body that is getting this wrong. And it is not us. Okay. So I'm seconding.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. I think that's well said. Personally, I'm not too influenced by sort of diktat on the whole. I don't like being told what to do, but we have to take into consideration all the things that are happening. And I think we've over the last 2 years we've done that quite well as a committee. We haven't succeeded. Sometimes we've refused applications, and unfortunately they've been upheld by the inspectorate on more than one occasion, as has been mentioned. But the officers here at Wychavon and the committee are acting in good faith, and it's very difficult for those residents. Indeed, this is one of the sort of not the last straw. Well, hopefully it is the last straw. There's not too many more applications, but we have to look at the evidence and vote as we think it should be. Kieran.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, because there was a couple of points that members made about not feeling they know enough to make a decision almost, and the point about deferral. I mean, what I would say in terms of the design in front of us is what's been put forward for consideration, and that's what we're sort of asked to consider. I think ultimately, I'll point out again, it wasn't a reason that we refused it previously for quite recently in design terms. So that would call into question the consistency of decision making, as we've discussed. And then in terms of the Grampian condition matter, I mean, the outcomes of that are twofold. There will be a condition. It'll be the one that's already on the papers or the one that's been put forward that was in the inspector's decision. The point of us seeking council opinion is to satisfy ourselves that we're in a legal and strong position. So actually, if we put forward the Grampian condition, because we will feel we can defend that, and if somebody does ultimately, or the applicant does ultimately want to appeal that, then they can, but it will be because we will have put it on because we think we're justified, and hopefully they will accept that advice and they will not be appealing it because we'll have that strong advice. I think where, in fairness to the applicants, that they don't know what if we got some poor advice and we decided to put it on anyway, then they wouldn't want to necessarily commit not taking action against that advice. So until they have the facts, they won't be able to establish their position. But ultimately, that's what's going to influence. So it's quite clear, really, there's two conditions. One, the Grampian condition, which is our preferred condition, because we think it's more robust. But if that isn't deemed to be satisfactory or legally sound, there's that fallback of the inspector's decision and the condition imposed on that. So I think that's hopefully cleared those matters up, and I think that should really, I think, again, I hope that gives members the ability to make a decision today one way or another. Thank you.
Councillor Kersey.
Chairman, thank you. I was only really going to speak very much along the lines that Kieran has just spoken, is that What's her name? What's your name, Nicola? What, Councillor, what are you? Anyway, Nicola, Councillor Morris, thank you, has just said about going to the person responsible. But I think the important thing here for the residents of Drakes Broughton to be, as I said earlier, assured by, and that is because of all the applications that have come before Drakes Broughton, because of the concerns and fears about the flooding, because of the lack of infrastructure and investment in the infrastructure in Drakes Broughton, that is why we've gone way beyond what would happen with any other application or an applications. And that is that our officers have worked with Severn Trent, we've looked at everything to do with the Grampian conditions, we've got the date that Severn Trent are committed to actually putting the infrastructure in. We know that we can have those conditions in place so that the infrastructure has to be in place before that comes into play. We're also then strengthening the conditions to say not only can somebody not occupy these properties before all this is proven to work, but we're actually saying that no development can happen until this is proven to work. So, and that's why I say that today, whatever the committee do is only the start of things. There's all those safety measures in place so that whatever is decided today, if this does not work, or if these things that are promised do not come into place, then this development does not happen. Simple as that. And that is the only basis that the committee and the officer's recommendation has been put before the committee, is on that basis of all those sureties and conditions. And it's simply, if the infrastructure that does not come forward to ensure that flooding does not happen or is not made worse in Drakes Broughton as a result of this development, then the development will not go ahead.
Thank you. Are there any more comments from the committee before we have a vote? Councillor Turier.
I just querying about asking the developer to rejig or have a look at the planning. Can that be made a condition, or is that not possible if it's passed?
I don't know. You can. Can it be made a condition?
Not very easily, because it's a full application, so we've got full details for consideration. That would be a different motion to redesign the scheme.
Yeah, we'd have to redesign it and go away with a different motion, I'm afraid. You'll have to rely on the applicant. Any further comments before we take a vote? Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to us. We have a proposal from Councillor Dawkes, seconded by Councillor Morris, for approval along the lines of the recommendation by the officers, with slight variation on conditions 13. Would you like to cover those? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to go to my proposer and seconder to make sure that they're happy with the wording in relation to the motion. So the motion is for approval as per the officer recommendation, but subject to officers looking at tightening condition 13 to include timings / phasings of any surface water features.
Sorry, I think I'd like it a bit stronger than that. The developer did say that they would be putting in the drainage before doing anything else. So I think it's reasonable to actually condition that and say that the drainage should be in place prior to the first building being erected.
Sorry, Councillor Dawkes, was that before occupation or before...
Before a building going up. Before development starts. Oh, no, before a building is created.
Yeah.
Before foundations will do.
We don't have any issues in principle. I think the reason I'd suggested a sort of timetable, because we don't quite know how it all dovetails together. So there might be, like I said, there might be elements of the surface water that could be done straight away and before any buildings, but then there might be some that technically are part of the building, so you might have actually done some of the foundations. Yeah. So it's just to actually agree that, because I think if we're too rigid, it ultimately might not be practical. If that makes it's just from a practical purpose.
Okay. Can we ensure that the drain under the footpath is taken and connected from the building site to it's, what's the technical term for it? It's outfall, prior to any building works on site. That is the means of water getting away from the site is there. And that is the critical bit. Well, the Director of Planning wants to be
So let me have another go at this then, if that's all right with you, just so that we make sure that we've got something. So I think Kieran's explained that some of the surface water features, if you think you're coming off drain pipes and things, so you have to have a building up. So we can tie some of the things earlier, and that's why we're talking about that phasing and timings being important, because some can go earlier, others got to be, you know, as the building goes up. So what I suggest is that so the motion's for approval as per the officer recommendation, but subject to the officers looking at tightening that condition 13, which will include not only the timings and phasing of any surface water features, but also will look at the timing in relation that's prior to any buildings being erected, that the drain under the footpath is connected. Thank you. So if members, if you'd like to raise your voting cards, those in favour then, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any abstentions? So, Chair, that motion's carried. That's 7 in favour and 5 against.
Thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and we thank you, committee and officers, and we will see you at the next committee meeting at the end of February. Thank you.